Hello everybody and welcome to another video tutorial. Now for this week's tutorial you guys voted and you guys chose the Namorodo creature. So this creature is a aboriginal demon essentially that's actually made up of bones and skin. So when I started off working on this piece, the description I found did not necessarily describe it as having wings per se, but that it would fly essentially. So taking this information, I assumed that this creature was generally human-like in appearance and possibly, because it would attack its victims, would actually remove some of the bone mass or some of the skin portions and actually add it to its own structure. So taking that into account, when I was working on this image, the very first thing I worked on was the skeletal form. Because this would be such an important part of this character design, I needed to make sure that that had a solid foundation before working on adding the skin light effects and possibly adding certain muscular details to them. So I wasn't entirely sure at this point where I was going to go. I knew that I needed the skeletal form. So right now I'm adding in some of the detail elements for the skeleton. I'm also using the sketching brush that I've been using in the past couple of videos, especially during my live stream events, for actually working out sketching ideas for background layouts. So I wanted to do a test with the same brush to see how it would function if I actually started rendering out a character with this brush. So the majority of the preliminary stages was actually done with this textured brush. I later on switched back to some of my more familiar brushes just because they led to a better style of drawing that I was looking for. So right now I'm actually adding some of the musculature onto the character. I will actually end up removing that after I'm done working on the sash. The main reason for that decision was that it just seemed too much detail information given the character description that I had. Since it was mostly bone-like, I wanted to emphasize the bone-like structure mainly. Also, the hand that I'm currently working on and the arm, I do actually end up changing the hand position later on to make it look more like it's getting ready to grab onto something. So this sash that you currently see me adding will also end up being removed, mainly because I didn't like how it just didn't look like it belonged into the image. So I end up just deleting that out, painting it out, as you can see. So at this stage I'm still using the exact same brush that I started off with for as long as I possibly can before moving on to something else. It's actually only when I actually start adding in some of the color elements that I actually end up switching brushes, because at that point I can clearly see that it's just not going to work for the larger portions when I'm defining especially the wing elements later on. So I've just started adding the color, and I've just added essentially a color layer to this image to make it a little bit faster for adding color into it. So once I've done that, I've actually switched brushes at this stage, and I'm sampling all the colors that I already have in the piece. So both the light and the shadow areas, I'm just reusing those same colors, but now that I'm using a different brush, it's giving it a different look as well. So I'm trying to soften out some of the shadows to make them a little less harsh, because you generally don't want too harsh of a shadow in the character, generally because you don't need to go that harsh for those colors. Just working out the structure for the skull. You can see that I'm adding quite a bit more detail at this stage, refining the structure so it makes a bit more sense, and testing out also some of the colors that I'm going to be using as well. So this entire image actually didn't take too long to do. It took approximately 4 hours to complete, so it was a very short image. It was heavily focused on the character, so I wasn't really focusing on the background elements, so I kept the background very simple, and you'll see as I'm working on this image, once I start adding in the background, it is extremely simple. For the wings, I'm using the exact same brush as I've been using. I wanted the wings though to be more rough looking, so I did actually soften out some of those edges just to make it look a bit more like it's receding in the background behind the character. So fleshing out the bone area Just making sure that the structure is somewhat defined but not overly defined, because you won't see all that detail. Once I start adding in the shading, you'll notice that I do actually soften up most of that detail just because it's not needed. Finding the information in the hand. So I will actually be removing this hand very, very shortly. I just didn't like the way it was positioned. It just didn't look natural, so I just painted it out and reworked that area. Now for almost this entire image, I actually used my brush at about 70 to 100% opacity. You can't always do that with all brushes, but the brushes I was using, they did function fairly well with that. I also didn't like the size of the head in relation to the body and where it was located, so you just saw me a couple moments ago just copy and duplicate that area and paste it in and then refine out the information. So I'm just adding the sewn up structure, so maybe his wings are actually made out of the flesh of his victims or something like that. So I'm just changing the hand perspective because once again I wasn't too satisfied with its position. It just didn't look like it would be a position that something that was flying would have. I'm just keeping the general information fairly simple there, and I'm just adding some cloud elements to help explain essentially where he is in comparison to his environment, and softening out some of the darker areas. And it's important that I show certain areas receding in comparison to others. That really does help show where the areas that are foremost to the viewer are located. So all I did is I just used a cloud brush to paint that in, and then erased areas that I didn't need, and then redefined other areas as well. So this image is completely done now, as you can see. So it was a very short image, but it was really fun to work on. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope to see you guys soon. So thank you and take care.